Okay, so we're going to do a review on open loop and closed loop operation. Like I said, this is the fundamental system we use, everywhere from the thermostat, controlling the heating and air conditioning in a room. That's probably the simplest way to understand it that you'll understand really easily. When the temperature comes down enough, then the thermostat senses it and it kicks on the heater. Heater comes up and the thermostat senses it, turns off the heater. Cools down, thermostat senses it, kicks on the heater. And as you can see, it's just like this. The sensors are coming in and they're reporting to the computer what's going on with the engine. Okay, what sensors? Well, I got a list of them right here. Oxygen sensors located in the exhaust manifold. Coolant temperature sensors, so the computer knows how warm the engine is, if it's warmed up completely. Intake air temperature sensor is going to sense the temperature of the air coming into the engine, because the temperature of the air is going to affect its density and how much oxygen it has in a given amount of volume, and also its density. Crankshaft position sensor is going to tell the computer where the engine is in its rotation, and camshaft position sensor is going to tell the computer where the engine is in terms of when the number one piston is at top dead center firing, for instance, between the compression stroke and the power stroke. And the vehicle speed sensor, which is located on the transmission, is going to tell the computer how fast the vehicle is going. It's not really an engine sensor, but it's one of the sensors that the computer is going to use in order to make some decisions about what to do with the actuators. See, there's three elements to this process. There's sense, there's decide, and there's act. Actuators, it's kind of a weird word, and we don't usually use it in normal conversation, but the actuators are simply the things that the computer controls. See, the computer doesn't control the sensors just report to the computer, but the computer controls these things. Idle speed. What's idle speed? The speed of the engine with your foot off the pedal? Yeah. Good. Okay. Fuel injector pulse width, which is to say how much fuel is getting into the engine with each fuel injector opening. Spark advance, which is the control we have on the ignition system. The emission control systems, of course. The auxiliary systems like the fans and other important systems like that. And the network bus, which is putting out all this information about what the computer is doing onto the network so that other computers know what to do with it, such as transmission control module, body control module. There's a lot of cars that if you go over 15 miles an hour, they're going to lock the doors, for instance. And like I said, the transmission control module, based on, you know what's missing? Let's put that there. Sorry. How about throttle position sensor?
Oh, yeah.
That was silly. Now, is it safe to say that if the throttle's closed, you're not trying to accelerate? Yeah. Basically, the throttle opening is going to have a pretty good indication of how hard you're trying to get the engine to work. Now, if the throttle's all the way open, that usually means you're trying to accelerate or at least maintain speed. And what that's going to do in your transmission control module, for instance, is make your shifts harder and later. Your shift points. Okay, well, that's closed loop operation. And closed loop operation is what we're after because, of course, it's going to give us lower emissions, better fuel economy, more power, better drivability, and less engine wear. But we can't do closed loop all the time. And the reason we can't do closed loop all the time is because we know that when sensors aren't warmed up, they aren't accurate. And there's a bunch of these sensors that we have to warm up first before we can use them for closed loop operation. Because after all, you got to understand that the computer, all it knows is what the sensors report. So if the sensors are inaccurate, the computer's not going to know that. And what it's going to do is it's going to issue the wrong instructions to the actuators, and that could lead to a problem with drivability, or even worse. We can't go to closed loop immediately because we've got to wait for the sensors to warm up. And yesterday we discussed how different ways we were getting things to warm up more quickly. Fundamental way we're getting things to warm up more quickly is by changing engine designs so that we get a quicker temperature rise inside the engine. That's going to make the coolant temperature sensor sense that rise in temperature. So if we wanted to talk about the transition between open loop, which is how we start, and closed loop, which is what we want to get to, I'll write it like this. Open, well, go like that. Open loop to closed loop. Three things have to happen. Number one is time. Now, it used to take 2 or 3 minutes to get into closed loop because we really wanted to make sure everything was warmed up. That was when we had really primitive systems. Well, now, there are some cars that will actually go into closed loop while the engine's still starting. Most of them, though, will take a little bit of time, and they'll wait for these other two criteria to be met, which is, number 2 is that the coolant temp has to rise (45°F). Now you say, well, 45°F, temperature rises a lot. But if you think about it, you know, you've got each one of these cylinders is got a big fire inside it, and it's having what, 25 fires per second? So it'll warm up pretty quick if you let it. And the third thing is that the oxygen sensor has to be greater than 600°F. And the reason for that is it's not going to be accurate until it's warmed up. It's not going to do this pattern over here until it's warmed up. So what did we do to get the oxygen sensor to warm up more quickly? We put heaters on it. And you're going to see heaters on every oxygen sensor about 1995. Yeah, probably so. Okay, but let's explore what open loop really means. Open loop means that, again, the reason we start an open loop is because we don't trust the sensor output yet, because the stuff's not warmed up. So what open loop means is that we're not going to use sensor output to determine what the computer tells the actuators to do. The computer monitors the sensors, but doesn't use them. Now, of course, it's going to use the crankshaft position sensor and the camshaft position sensor because it has to in order to fire the spark plugs at the right time. But I'm talking about things like these two, this, that. Well, it'll use that. Okay, so if the computer isn't paying attention to the sensors, then how does it know what to tell the actuators? It does that because it has pre-programmed instructions. Which is to say, at the factory, they design some software so that the computer will be able to run the vehicle until we get in closed loop. Now, this will kind of explain why we need to get in closed loop as quickly as possible. Because, you know, you can run an engine significantly richer than it's supposed to be, which is to say more fuel, and it'll still run fine. But if you run it a little bit lean, you're going to have significant drivability problems up to and including stumbling and dying. And what the manufacturers don't want customers to do is back their cars out. When my dad lived in Laverne, he used to back his truck out onto Arrow Highway. They don't want you backing your car out into a busy street like that and then having it die. So they're always going to run your fuel injectors richer than they really have to. That's to keep it running. So, yeah, man. So, we're going to run open loop for a very short period of time, hopefully. And then we go to closed loop, which is really what we need in order to get less emissions, better fuel economy, more power, better drivability, and less engine wear. Now, old cars, a lot of times we had problems with them falling out of closed loop. The oxygen sensor would get cold. That was before the days when we put heaters on oxygen sensors. And really, heaters on oxygen sensors have solved this problem of falling out of closed loop. Now, we're pretty much in closed loop all the time. Now, when you go to your scan tools, you're going to see OL and CL. That's usually the first thing you're going to see on a scan tool's data display. Okay, so what's OL and CL? Open loop and closed loop. And the reason they put that there is so you can know where your computer is in terms of these two engine control strategies. Now, let me ask you, let's say one of these sensors failed completely. I don't know, coolant temperature sensor. That would probably kick you back into open loop. If you lost your coolant temperature sensor completely, how would you know? Is it going to put a light on the dash? Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's something that's going to affect the emissions, so it's definitely going to put a light on the dash, check engine light, service engine soon, malfunction indicator lamp, however you want to say it. And that will tell you have a problem. Get in there with a scan tool or whatever, code reader, whatever you want, scan tool is better, and see what the problem is. So things are a lot better than they used to be, way better. The scan tools, I mean, this is way better than it used to be. Much easier to make money, I think, this way. But it's not something you can just do because Grandpa showed you how to fix his tractor. However, modern day tractors are all using this too. So this is the kind of information you can use all over the world on all types of vehicles. I mean, airplanes got the same system now. Helicopters, trains, all this stuff. All uses the same basic systems, which is why I wanted to make sure you were clear on it and had a lot of exposure to it. Remember, the definition of the network bus is it's the structure that all the computers on the car hang to. And at the end of the network bus, let's remember, at the end of a network bus, there's this big thing just like this. You ever seen that before? Sure. That's the OBD2 connector. And it's there so we can access that status with our diagnostic equipment.